Hello again, thanks for joining. Here's what we've got coming up in this episode. It's a Hornby Railways model, it's number R143 and it's a 280 steam locomotive from British Railways, it's number 2857 and we're going to have a look at it today. So this is another model that I got second hand. You can see straight away that we have this pipette in here, so I'm guessing that this has the ability to have steam coming out of it. Now Hornby have recently introduced a new steam feature which uses water. This is quite an old model, so I'm assuming it's the older version when it had oil. I always found that to be a bit smelly and I didn't like using it, and therefore I'm probably not going to use it on this one. But it's interesting that we've got that feature available. But you can see that there's hardly any wear at all on this box. Even down in the corners there's just a hint of a little bit of scuffing here, but it's nothing major, so it's quite impressive. Let's get this out and have a look. So we do indeed have a little pipette here, and we have this sachet which I guess is the oil for the smoke. It's never been used, that's quite interesting that it's still got that. And we also have these instructions. As usual, it's got a different model shown down here, a Princess Class 462. That's not the model we've got today though. Inside it's got some instructions about how to maintain this motor and change things like couplings. So this is just a generic information sheet, it's not specific about this model. One of the features of Hornby locomotives of this era is that it's held in this plastic sleeve. This one's starting to get a bit yellowed around the edges. I've not seen that happen before on Hornby models, but I have seen it happen a lot on Markland models. Anyway, let's open this up and have a look at the locomotive. So first of all, I've noticed that we get the standard Hornby driver and fireman and also the vacuum pipes here. These two guys must get around because they seem to come with every single Hornby locomotive of this era. Anyway, they're in the package in here, never been opened, that's really nice. Even though I got this second hand, it looks as though this has not been used that much. So let's have a look at the locomotive. So this is a tender drive locomotive, so the motor is in the tender and these wheels are free to revolve. The action is very smooth on here. It's quite a simple set of coupling rods that this locomotive has got, but they revolve really well and they look quite impressive. Let's start down the front of the locomotive. So one thing that you notice straight away is that it has this wire handrail all the way around the boiler and even over the top of the smoke box door here. That's been really nicely added on. It goes through these little plastic brackets very nicely, and it really helps to add an extra piece of interest to the model. Here on the buffer beam, the red has been applied very nicely and it's very crisp at the edges as well. You can see a hole here for the vacuum pipe that we saw in the packaging. And it has these bars going up to the boiler which are very delicate but really nicely applied there. You'll see this pony truck with a wheel on it here has the coupling applied to it. It's a massive big Hornby coupling and it's integral into the pony truck, so you can't really change that. It kind of spoils the front of the locomotive. Wish they hadn't done that and had the provision to be able to remove that. But it does cantilever very well, allowing this model to get round tight corners. And you can see there's a hole which has a screw in it that holds the body to the chassis. This part here where the cylinders are has a bit of a moulding defect here. It's kind of sunken in a little bit. That's a bit of a shame that that's happened. Down the side of the model you can see that they have included rivet details as you go along, and it's good to see that there is space between the boiler and the chassis. I guess that's prototypical of this model, and it's nice that Hornby have done that here. I guess the fact that this is tender drive has allowed this to happen quite simply. There's some nice ridges going around the boiler as well, and the chimney is quite nicely detailed. You can see inside there that the smoke generator must be in there. And as we move down the boiler you can see some other small parts added on. There is this line running along the boiler at this part. I'm not sure if that's prototypical because it stops at this ridge here. And finally down this end where the cab is, you can see some handrails have been added here into the moulding and picked out in silver. The number is very clearly applied. It's a transfer of 2857 there with the X above it and that blue dot. Another transfer. And there's also some nice rivet detail here on the cab sides. You can see the two windows on each side of the cab. There's no glazing there, and up top you can see that it has these two metal whistles added on. Looking down the top of the boiler there's a ridge running all the way. I think that might actually be a moulding mark and it's quite pronounced, so that's a bit of a shame. Inside the cab here there's some detail on the back of the boiler. It's just moulded into the plastic, and I think this might actually have a glow from the firebox as well. I'll give that a test in a little bit. This side of the locomotive is very similar to the first, but it does have this metal piece added on here. It's in chrome. It's probably not very prototypical to be chrome. You might want to dull that down if this model is yours. Looking at the valve gear, this all works very nicely. It's very smooth like I've already said, and the wheels revolve very freely. You can see on this one that there's some pickup here. I guess that's to power maybe the light for the firebox. Underneath, this set here has no flanges on it. the others do. I guess that's to help it get round the corners. Here you can see Hornby made in Great Britain. So that obviously dates this model before all the manufacturing went out to China. There's some nice detail here, the brake blocks as well, they're in line with the tread, that's really nicely done. And this drawbar has electrical contacts as well to the tender, so that allows any pickup from the locomotive to be sent to the tender. So let's have a look at the tender. So it's obvious that this has got the motor inside it. I would guess it's a Ringfield motor as well, it's quite heavy. One thing you notice straight away is that the wheels are really quite chromed here, and that really shines through. The rest of the paintwork, obviously it's just black, it's not even lined, and so therefore you get really drawn to the metalwork here, and that's probably not prototypical either, so there's a good opportunity here to do some weathering and really improve this model. The side here, it's quite a plain, simple design of the main part of the tender. But you can see that this handrail here has been added on as a bit of metal wire, and there's one on the other side as well. They bend inwards, I'm not sure if that's prototypical or not. And here at the front of the tender you've got quite a nice representation of the details here, a couple of wheels and the coal coming through for the firemen. Again, it's a steam locomotive which has got the coal just piled absolutely to the brim. At the back of the tender there's a nice dome moulded here and the hatch for the water to go in. And down the back there's not much going on here. There's a couple of steps, a little plate in the middle which hasn't got anything applied to it, and you can see the buffer beam here. So interestingly, this one is glossy and the one on the locomotive was matte. I'm not quite sure why that's happened. This almost looks as though it's been repainted at some point. There's another hole there for the vacuum pipe and the buffers, which aren't sprung loaded or anything. That's the same on the locomotive. Thankfully the coupling here is able to be removed. It's not an M pocket, but you can take it off with that screw there if you wanted to change it. And finally there's these little handrails on the corners which are moulded into the plastic and just picked out in silver, and they're actually quite disappointing. I think I'd probably detail this by taking those off and adding in wire handrails. The moulding on the chassis is very nice. It's got a lot of rivet detail and a nice representation of the springs and axle boxes, and you can see that the wheels are pretending to be spoked but they aren't actually. You can also see a part of the gear wheels there coming from the motor. Underneath you can see that the two outer wheels are driven, the inner wheels are just free to revolve, and the outer wheels have traction tyres as well. The British Railways logo here is a very nice transfer. Been very nicely applied, and you can really see the writing is very clear, British Railways. One of the other things I noticed up here on the tender is that there's another bit of a moulding problem here where it looks as like some of the plastic is sagged. You'll see on the inside that there's a void here, which is probably part of the design of this locomotive, but when that's been moulded it hasn't been done that well, and therefore you've got this really odd looking defect on the side of the moulding. It's not evident on the other side, but you can see that there are some issues as well here, and that corresponds to other parts at the top. So there's obviously been some problems with the moulding on this one. Anyway, let's see if we can get this working. We've now got this on the test track. Let's give it some power and see what happens. So that's great, it worked first time, it didn't need a push or anything. A lot of people slag off these Ringfield motors, but I actually think they work pretty well, especially if you maintain them. They seem to do sterling work. This model seems to run really well, and the firebox glow works as well. I'm not going to test the smoke, I don't like the smell of it. Anyway, let's put this on the scales and see how much it weighs. So this model weighs 367 grams. So this 280 steam locomotive from Hornby has some interesting parts to it, and it's got some troubling features as well. Some of the things I don't like about this model is the massive coupling at the front that you can't remove. The metalwork is very chromed as well, which is not prototypical, but the biggest problem by far is the moulding issues, especially on the tender. So there's obviously been something going wrong with the moulding process on this model. I'm not sure whether it's affected all of these models or whether this is just a one-off, but it's really detracting from this model. However, on the plus side, it is an interesting looking steam locomotive. It's got some nice lines to it, the cab is quite appealing, and the tender is quite interesting as well. I think it could benefit from some weathering, and that would really improve the model, and things like the handrails could be improved as well. The addition of the smoke box glow is quite interesting, and while I don't like the smell of the steam that comes out of these locomotives, you might be okay with that, and that would give an extra little feature to this model which would make it quite appealing. It has a Ringfield motor in the tender, and if you keep that serviced it will run very nicely. The tender is quite heavy, and I think it will be able to pull quite a nice long train, probably goods train. There's not much decoration on this model, it's just plain black, but what decoration there is being applied very nicely. So overall, this isn't the best model you're ever going to see. It's got some nice parts to it, but it's also got some really terrible parts to it. This could be a model that appeals to younger enthusiasts who just want a solid locomotive with a number of features, and the smoke might be quite interesting for them to play around with. For a serious modeler, I think you need to look elsewhere. I'll put this on the turntable so you can see all the way around. Let me know what you thought about this video and my analysis of these models in the comments below. I'd really be interested to hear what you think. Please give this video a thumbs up, it really helps this channel, and you can subscribe for more videos like this in the future. But for now, that's it for today. See ya!